It's Jim Martorano from All About Town. This is my umpteenth interview with this great state senator to my right, and it's my pleasure and my honor to be with Senator Harckham today. But just wanted to let you know, I think he bought out AI because when I AI'd him, the report I got was unbelievable. It's just fantastic. It says here, State Senator Peter Harckham has established a reputation as one of the New York Senator's most productive legislators. And it said in 2026 alone, you sponsored over 80 Senate bill, passed 80 Senate bills, uh, including environmental and all kinds of public safety, health care, practical solutions that improve the lives of New Yorkers. It's some congratulations on your great work.
Well, thank you, Jim. First of all, it's always good to be with you. And um, who says AI is a bad thing? But in all seriousness, it's all about the work. We take the work very seriously. We're only in these positions for a certain amount of time, a finite amount of time. And my position has always been, while I'm there, we're going to work as hard as we can and get as much accomplished, both legislatively and here in the district for our constituents.
You couldn't have been more correct. I've been doing this a long time. I've been alive 77 years, and I've been involved in politics. My father wanted both my sister and I to be civic minded. So from an early age, we're forced to watch every political show on television, all the newscasts, Walter Cronkite and before him, and John Kennedy's inaugural address, and going on. And of course, I got involved in politics early on, but you get to see hundreds and hundreds of people come back and forth and in and out of the public sphere. But you are, I think, in the best tradition of a public servant. I mean, I've watched your career. I mean, you ran in 2018, 2020, 2022, 2024, and now 2026. And through that entire time, you've accomplished so much for people in the district, and you've done it selflessly. And I'm just so proud to have you on the show.
Well, again, it's my pleasure to be here. And, it's all about the constituents, whether they're Republicans, whether they're Democrats, whether they're independents. We don't ask. It's about constituent service, working with all layers of government to solve the challenges that individuals have and municipalities have.
Of course, the big accomplishment of any state's legislator is the budget. Can you tell the audience a little bit about this year's budget, what it accomplishes? And I know you had to make compromises, but you did accomplish quite a few things, and you came in at a good number. So maybe we could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, there were some good wins in this year's budget. I think number one starts with pre-K outside New York City, something I've been fighting for years. We've had partial pre-K outside New York City. It costs about $10,000 to educate a 4-year-old. New York State was only reimbursing school districts $5,000 unless they qualified for the enhanced rate. And even with that, not for every child. So many districts had lotteries, or they opted not to do pre-K. So this year in the budget, finally, we got that funding up to $10,000 per child. And starting in 2 years' time, it will be mandatory that all 4-year-olds attend pre-K, and all school districts provide every slot. So that was a big win for our families, for affordability, get parents back in the workplace a year earlier, great for equity, and children that are in pre-K have been shown to learn better. Early intervention services start earlier, so the cost per child is lower throughout. They've even done longitudinal studies that showed children that attend high-quality pre-K actually earn more throughout their lives. So this is a big win for the families of the Hudson Valley.
And given the tenor of the federal cuts, which have been massive in terms of people in need, in terms of all homeless people, people with food shortages, et cetera, you've done a lot to try to provide, I think, an enhanced safety net to make up for the loss of federal funding. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, unfortunately, we can't backfill everything. The cuts from the federal government were severe. Just on July 1st, 450,000 New Yorkers lost their health insurance. Not a good thing. 450,000 New Yorkers have lost their food assistance from the federal government. Not a good thing. Next year, another million New Yorkers will lose health insurance from the federal government. So the cuts are very real, they're very deep. We are trying where we can to provide assistance. We've increased, for instance, money for food distribution groups, for pantries, for the larger groups that provide assistance to those pantries. We will continue to do our food drives where we can, increase money to build housing in New York, increase money for infrastructure to build housing in New York. So we're trying to do what we can in New York State, but unfortunately we're not going to be able to backfill all of those cuts.
But you're doing the best you can. Uh, when all is said and done, I mean, you've been doing this now, it's going to be 8 years, going on 10 years, and many campaigns. Looking forward in the future, Pete Harckham retires. He looks back on his career. What are you most proud of?
I think it's, when I'm at a street fair or I'm even just out on the street by myself and someone comes up to me and says, "Hey, Pete, your wife helped my wife with the Department of Labor issue," or "Hey, Pete, your wife helped my son with the DMV issue." I think those are really the meaningful moments that we'll look back on and just know that we use the power of our office to the best of our ability to help our neighbors.
Now, your office does a lot of helping constituents. Have you noticed an increase in calls and people needing help over the last year or two?
Yeah, we've had an uptick in unemployment cases. Folks looking for assistance with the Department of Labor. That's a department that has its challenges, and so folks come to us, and we've been quite successful in linking people up with the unemployment benefits that they deserve. So that's been the number one uptick. Obviously with the high cost of utility prices over this last winter, dozens and dozens and dozens of calls regarding utility prices that we can tie directly to the high cost of natural gas, which is why I fight so hard for renewables here in New York State. A kilowatt of solar we know is cheaper than a kilowatt of natural gas. And so, yes, natural gas will be in the mix for the foreseeable future, but we also need to very rapidly scale up our renewables. That was one of my big successes in the budget this year. I had a bill called the ASAP Act, Accelerate Solar for Affordable Power. When we get to 20 gigs of distributed solar, and this is rooftop and community, not the mega projects that people complain about upstate, it will save our ratepayers $1 billion, and that was through an independent analysis. So we got much of that into the budget. We didn't get all of it. We got $200 million for the New York Sun program to stimulate that. That's been very successful. We got $1 billion in the Sustainable Futures Fund, both for clean energy and also for energy efficiency, to weatherize our homes. When we're not using as much electricity, we're saving money. And so that's been a big emphasis as well.
And I think when we look back on your career, your environmental work stands out among a lot of things you've done as just phenomenal. Looking at the future, looking at our kids and grandchildren's future, your environmental work will continue your legacy. For example, the Save the Hudson Act. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was something we passed a couple years ago when we found out through the Decommissioning Oversight Board that Holtec was prepared to release over 1 million gallons of tritiated wastewater into the Hudson River. People went ballistic. Assemblymember Levenberg and I passed a bill that would halt that discharge based on economic harm. The governor signed the bill. We had a petition, independent petition, over 450,000 New Yorkers signed that petition. The Hudson River means so much emotionally to so many New Yorkers. Unfortunately, that bill was overturned in court, not the premise of the law, but rather on the basis that it had been an established NRC practice. And so right now we're in a holding pattern between the Attorney General's office, who's representing us in the matter, and Holtec. And right now there's an agreement in place that they will not release. The state will not appeal, and that's kind of the holding pattern for right now. But I think it would be a big mistake to go ahead and release over 1 million gallons. So many of our municipalities have tied their revitalization to their proximity of the river. You know, we have gone past the industrial age where rivers were our toxic dumping ground, and we've got to do better.
Besides supporting working people and people in need, you've also been a big supporter of veterans. I noticed last week when we almost got together last week, but you were at the VFW. Could you tell us a little about your ongoing support of veterans?
Well, we do a lot of work with veterans. We have a Veterans Advisory Committee that meets probably 3-4 times a year, discuss a variety of topics for veterans. We passed a bill a few years ago that was signed into law that when veterans go into congregate care facilities like assisted living, even if they're incarcerated, they may still be, or their families may still be entitled to benefits, so that if they go into any congregate care setting, they must immediately ask that person, have you ever served in the armed forces? And if the answer is yes, then they must call the State Veterans Affairs office, and a caseworker will be dispatched to see if that individual or their family is eligible for benefits.
Now, lost in the shuffle of all the great things you've done, I think people forget that you were very instrumental in addressing the opioid epidemic. Can you talk a little bit about Matthew's Law and all the work you've done in that area?
Yeah, my first 4 years in the Senate, I chaired the committee on alcoholism and substance use disorders. I'm in long-term recovery myself, so this work's very personal to me. We've done over 20 Narcan trainings. We established the Opioid Settlement Fund Oversight Board so that stakeholders would have a say in how that money was spent. We put that money in a lockbox, so it must go to treatment, prevention, harm reduction, and recovery efforts. We doubled the amount of funding that OASAS got, and our efforts have had results. Overdose deaths are coming down. There are still too many, but the science and evidence-based approach that we have taken in New York State is beginning to pay dividends.
So you're busy. I mean, you're running around. Are you in campaign mode, or are you just legislative mode, or both?
Well, when we're back from session, we do a lot of things. It's time for constituent meetings, time to meet with municipalities, time to roll out grant funding. We have another $5 million in discretionary funding. We're going to be rolling out $2.2 million of that. $100,000 will go to every municipality. Doesn't matter whether if they're Republican or Democrat controlled. Everybody gets the same amount of money. We'll start looking at our legislative priorities for next year. And of course, you throw a campaign in on top of all of that.
That's right.
So it's always busy.
I always felt that having to campaign every 2 years is just too much. You just get elected and you have to start thinking about next time, which is ridiculous. You don't have a time to sit back and govern, and that's why I always recommended a 4-year term for state senators.
Well, I appreciate that. We know what the rules were going in. This is what we signed up for. So we're prepared for 2 years. The way the Constitution set it up is so that we could be accountable to the people who we represent. We try to be available. Since I've been elected in 2018, we've done a monthly coffee and conversation. We rotate them all over the district, and they've been wonderful. Unlike the sort of yelling affairs that you see with members of Congress, these are smaller scale. We usually do them in libraries, and we have only one rule. We'll talk about anything people want to talk about. Only no yelling. We treat each other with respect. We're neighbors. And you know what? In 7.5 years, it's worked out pretty well. I learned from constituents. Hopefully they learn something from me, and they learn something from each other. Sometimes I just back off. If people are having an interesting exchange, right. I'll just facilitate and let constituents speak back and forth. So it's a wonderful exchange of ideas. Folks get to know each other. And the good thing about it is a lot of people come to these events who I've never met before. They've never met me before. It's not like the usual crowd, the cognoscenti. It's we get a lot of folks who get our e-blast or see it on social, and they say, "I've never met my senator. I want to come," and they'll come to the library, and we get there early. We get to know each other a little bit, and they're good events.
I remember, I still write a column, as you know, for the paper, and I wrote a column about 20 years ago. I ran for Congress, as you may recall, and I
Yeah.
think was that the first time I met you?
Yeah. Yeah, the first time we met was when we went door to door together
Yeah.
when you were running for Congress.
Yeah, that was a long time ago, but one of the best experiences of my life, and also, fortunately, meeting you was very important for me because you've been a great public servant rather. What do you, when you're going now to different communities and you're all over the place, what are you hearing from the constituents?
Well, affordability, it's not just a buzzword; it's a reality for folks. The tariffs have driven up prices. Climate change has driven up prices. The cost of natural gas has driven up utility rates. So it's very real. But we've been addressing this, since I first got into office. At the state level, there's nothing that we can do about inflation or about the president's tariffs or about his wars. But 6 of the 8 budgets I've worked on, we've cut middle class taxes. They're the lowest they've been in 70 years in New York State. We passed the property tax cap at 2%. We doubled the threshold for the senior property tax exemption. The money that we bring back into the district, we focused on fully funding foundation aid. That was a core principle of the Democratic Conference when we took over in 2018. The schools in the 40th Senate District are now receiving over $275 million annually more than when I was first elected. That's $275 million that our taxpayers don't have to pay in their property taxes. $40 million now in discretionary grants. We've increased CHIPS funding the last 2 years by $100 million. For people who don't know, CHIPS is a program where the state funds local road repairs. Very important. Also holds down local property taxes. Over $300 million in state road repairs in the district. Not to mention the millions of dollars in water quality infrastructure. Now is another thing that we passed in this year's budget. And in fighting for years for more water quality infrastructure funding. That's both wastewater and drinking water. And we were stuck at $500 million for many years, which is more than what most states do, but not enough. We have a $60 billion backlog in New York State. This year we were successful in increasing that by $250 million, so we're now up to $750 million in water quality investment funding, which is critical to our municipalities and their wastewater and clean drinking water needs.
Getting back to campaigning, I haven't campaigned in a long time, for myself at least. And when I ran 20 years ago, money was a problem, but now it's much more of a problem. Tell me a little bit about your experience. I mean, how much money does it take to run a state senate campaign, and how are you doing in that realm?
Well, one of the things that we've done to equalize the playing field, and actually this helps my opponents, but it's the right thing to do, is we now have public campaign financing in New York, a matching program. So the small dollar donations mean a lot more. We cut the maximum by more than half, from 12,000 to 5,000. So it's really important that we hustle for the small dollar donations, and we've done very well there. That's a sign of our grassroots support, is those $25, $50 donations that we get from folks. Those are matched as part of the program. There's a rigorous accounting and audit process to prevent fraud and corruption. But we've done a lot on the election front. People forget. They think we've always had early voting. That was something that we did in 2018. The John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act was an important measure, early voting. So we have done a lot on the election side to make our democracy more accessible to people.
In this campaign, I haven't read too many things that have been written against you, but what do you think the issues are in this campaign?
Well, affordability, energy policy, are I think paramount. Those are the issues that folks are grappling with, and that's why I focus so much on solar. You know, you look at a state like Texas, which doesn't even believe in climate change. They now lead the nation in building renewables and battery storage because they understand that it's cheaper for their constituents and it's much faster to scale. So natural gas, there's a 7 to 10 year backlog on gas turbines. So between siting and approvals, you're looking at 10 to 15 years. Nuclear, which is by far the most expensive, you're looking at 15 to 20 years between siting and permitting and building. You know, right now, New York State ratepayers are subsidizing the aging fleet of nuclear reactors upstate to the tune of $1 billion a year. That's not an affordable form of energy. Now, are we going to close those plants? No, we need the base load power. But if we're serious about meeting our future power demands and doing it in a cost effective way, solar is the fastest to scale and it's the cheapest by kilowatt hour.
Looking forward, do you have any thoughts about a pet project that you haven't fully implemented that you would like to see work on for the next term?
Well, we still continue to work on the Packaging Reduction Recycling Infrastructure Act. We passed it twice in the Senate. This year we met with stakeholders who are opposing the bill. We made even more modifications to the bill. When the Assembly announced that they were not going to be taking it up, we didn't take it up this year because, you know, given the crunch of the end of session, we just couldn't justify a 3-hour floor debate for a one-house bill. We knew it was going to pass, but it would have been nothing more than theater. So again, we'll continue to meet with stakeholders to see if we can reach a compromise. But it's so important because our taxpayers are spending billions of dollars a year just driving garbage from point A to point B. Sure. And we've got to reduce, and we've got to use packaging more wisely, more recycled content, more recyclable materials, and we've got to reduce single-use plastic. You know, 95% of plastics are not recyclable, even though they may have the little arrow on them. They are not recycled, so they either go to landfill or they go to waste incinerators, and neither is a good solution. So we need to reduce packaging, we need to use more recyclable materials, and we need to reduce the amount of single-use plastics that we use.
On the federal level, and I wonder how this trickled down to us, I've seen the Clean Water Act diluted and the enforcement of all these regulations eliminated or abandoned, and it's just incredible that this is happening. Do you feel that on the state level as well?
Well, we are holding the line in New York State. The EPA announced that they were going to be weakening the PFAS standards for drinking water. We passed legislation this year that would codify the existing standard in New York State. We'll see if the governor signs that bill. We hope she will. But if you look at what the EPA has done at the federal level, it's been an abomination. They have become an industry front group, and don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with industry, there's nothing wrong with making money, but the Environmental Protection Agency is there to protect our environment and to protect public health, and at the federal level, they're doing an abysmal job.
Yeah, it's amazing that's happening. It's just sad to see it from my perspective. All these things that we fought for decades to get in place, and they're being abandoned. And I think for no good reason other than perhaps greed and corruption. It's just sad. What about in terms of what's happening on the health area, the abandonment of shots and things that could protect us? How are we protecting New Yorkers from the federal government really leaving us in the lurch there?
Well, we have in New York empowered the head of the Board of Health and a commission to establish the shot standard versus the federal government rollback. I mean, you saw the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, eliminated flu shots in the military, and an entire class of Marine recruits got sick with the flu. And so what does that do to readiness? This is about public health, but it's also about the readiness of our armed forces. We have to have a healthy armed force. So, on the health side, we do what we can in New York. We focus on what we can do. I know many people are frustrated with what's going on at the federal level, and all we can do is what we can do one day at a time. Like, we can't wake up and fix the whole thing, so I focus on what I can do on a daily basis to protect New Yorkers, to keep New Yorkers healthy. And that's a big part of the work I do as chair of the Environmental Conservation Committee. Is, yes, it's about protecting our environment, but it's also about protecting public health. Toxic chemicals are bad for the environment. Toxic chemicals are bad for public health. So that's my mindset as I do this work. That it's, when we talk about state climate law, it's not about emissions accounting. It's about public health, and behind every ton of carbon or methane are co-pollutants that are making people sick. And what we want to do is make people well. We want to have healthier homes. We want to have healthier transportation. The 3 counties I represent, Westchester, Rockland, Putnam, thought of as bucolic counties. We're sitting here under a canopy of trees. All 3 of these counties get an F from the American Lung Association for air quality. And it's all because of our reliance on fossil fuels. And we can do better than that.
Well, I think you get an A+ for all the things you've done for this community and for this district, and I really appreciate you coming on the show today. I see you as a model public servant, a person that always puts the constituents first and works very, very hard, especially in difficult times. It's probably the most difficult time I've ever experienced in public life, in watching the destruction of the environment, destruction of ethics, the total corruption that's so evident. And you have stood firm, and you're really a credit to our legislative branch. And I want to thank you for coming. Do you have any final thoughts for people watching the show?
Well, I just want to thank you again for having me. It's an honor and it's a privilege to serve. I know this is a public trust. I take it very seriously. And if you ever need assistance, our office number is 914-241-4600. We're here to help.
Thank you very much. This is Jim Martorano from All About Town saying thank you for watching, and have a good night, and please get involved in your community. This is not a time to stay home. It's a time to get involved and speak up for democracy, because we certainly need your voices heard. Thank you very much, and good night.